So the next definition is Dutch door, and a Dutch door is something that we're all directly or indirectly familiar with. We've either seen them or we have encountered them in daily life. I don't know the origin of Dutch door. I'm thinking it's something from that part of Europe, maybe where it originated from. But what we're going to talk about is the way in which it relates to a steel door type definition, and probably some other stuff. So let's just talk randomly about Dutch doors, in no particular order, just the ideas and concepts as they come to my mind. A Dutch door is a very practical solution for certain applications, and generally you're going to see them when you need to have the ability to keep people and things on one side of the opening and have the other side of the opening occupied, but so as to prevent free-flowing traffic, but still allow communication between the two areas. And a Dutch door basically is a door that's, in effect, cut in half and then hung in a frame so that you can open the upper leaf while leaving the lower leaf generally in place. And applications for that would be service counters, where you have a warehouse and you have a person in the warehouse working, and let's just in this scenario say that there's inventory or tools, let's say, that have to be handed out. So you can leave the lower half of the Dutch door, the lower leaf, closed. The upper leaf can be opened, and you can transact business through that opening, even though you're not allowing traffic to come through. So I had said earlier, it's basically a door cut in half. It's really not that. A lot of people will want to order a Dutch door and Dutch frame and say, oh, what do you mean it's not in stock? Well, you just don't sell very many of them. Plus, you have to commit to keeping that material in stock because a Dutch door frame has to have more hinge preparations. A Dutch door has to be a door that's been made in two separate leaves, upper and lower. And each leaf is going to be treated differently. The lower leaf is going to have, let's just say in general, 2 hinge locations and then a lock prep. Two hinge preps and a lock prep. The upper leaf will generally have 2 hinge preps and then maybe nothing. It might just be reinforced for a bolt, what we call a Dutch door bolt. That would be a very common way to do that. I've had customers say, yeah, just give me the frame and I'm just going to cut the door in half and I'm going to make it work. Okay, well, the problem with that is generally you're going to have a height for the cut between the upper and lower leaf. It's generally about where the lock prep is going to be. On a 7.0, let's just say it's about 43.5 inch. The problem with that is that cut is generally going to get into the middle hinge location or be awfully close to it. So reworking stock material is just thoroughly impractical for that sort of application. So if you're doing a Dutch door, you're going to be ordering it as a Dutch door. Typical options are going to be, in terms of hanging devices, they're going to be hinges, butt hinges, or they're possibly going to be a continuous geared aluminum hinge or maybe a pin and barrel hinge. That's all super easy. On the lower leaf, the arrangement of the securing device is such that you're going to secure the lower leaf to the jamb. Let's just say a cylindrical lock set or a mortise lock or whatever you'd like to have on there. The upper leaf is generally secured directly to the lower leaf so that when business is done, upper leaf gets closed, it gets secured to the lower leaf, all of that gets opened, you exit, pull the door behind you because the upper leaf is now connected to the lower leaf. You pull the door closed and you're locked. The location of that lock set is now lower. It's generally about 6 inches lower than it would otherwise be because you're accommodating the fact that you want the top of the surface between the upper and lower leaf to be at a reasonable height to conduct this business at. it might be not unlike the height of a desk, although it'd be a little bit taller than that, because you're generally not sitting at a Dutch door, you're probably standing at a Dutch door. So having that dimension about 40 inch off the ground is probably fairly typical. Yeah, possibly. I would say that that'd be fairly accurate, maybe 38 inch, something in that range. Dutch doors, as it pertains to hollow metal, can get quite complicated. And what I mean by that is you can do pairs of Dutch doors. I don't know that I've ever actually sold a pair of Dutch doors. It is certainly possible to do that. I don't think that I've ever really seen that done. I know that I've seen a photograph of a pair of Dutch doors. What gets real tricky in the world of Dutch doors is when they are fire rated. You can do single opening Dutch doors. There are no such things as pairs of Dutch doors that are fire rated. It doesn't exist. Nobody has that. If you're in the door business, you know that there are 3 commandments when it comes to fire doors. They must be self-closing, they must be self-latching, and they must be free swinging. The self-closing and the self-latching is really where those two are going to apply, certainly to a Dutch door. You have to be able to have both of those leaves self-close, and both of those leaves have to self-latch. As long as you accomplish that, you're in good shape. I did a job for the Army, and it was going to be a fire-rated Dutch door, and it was going to have a high-security exit device. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. And I did find that order. It's actually from June of 2021, and we'll look at the detail of it. But this door it was fire rated. It was 407. I'm looking at it. It had a high security lock. It wasn't an exit device, although it may have been acting like an exit device. We'll have to look at the cut sheet of the lock, because I don't recall. It's been 3 years. The trick was getting it all to close and latch. So we needed to have both leaves self-closing. I needed to latch the upper leaf into the lower leaf, and I used a Marks, if you're familiar with the Schlage B250 series, Marks USA has a version of that. When I ordered, I had I won't name the hollow metal manufacturer, but he questioned, and it actually wasn't this job. The Marks makes a UL version of that gate latch, and I had ordered a fire-rated door, and I was just using that a gate latch. And I told the manufacturer, Schlage B250, and this guy questioned it. He didn't question. He says, I can't prep the door for that lock. I says, why? What's the problem here? Just put a lock prep in it, and it's not your concern how I'm latching it and maintaining the proper rating over the entire opening. He's like, well, I'm not going to do it. I says, well, why? He says, because you're specifying a Schlage B250. I says, oh, okay, that's not UL listed. Even with its no holdback thumb turn, it's not UL listed. And I said, well, that's a good catch. However, I'm actually using the Marks version of that. And I sent him the cut sheet, and the tail went between the legs, and off he went. But the bottom line is, it was very good that he questioned it. It was just I expected that they wouldn't question it, and they did. So good on them. So this we were going to latched the top leaf into the lower leaf, and I think this unit, we're going to talk about the shelves. I think this one had a shelf on the. There may have not been a shelf. I don't recall, but we'll take a look at it. So high security lock on the bottom, one that the military would use. UL compliant latch for the top into the lower leaf. Because it's a Dutch door, we had some astragals happening between the upper and lower leaves. There was a lot of thinking that had to go into all of this, and we'll take a look at that stuff. Now, when it comes to shelves, there are really 3 options: no shelf, a shelf that is centered over the bottom leaf, or a shelf that is on one side of the opening, either on the egress or the ingress side. It can be either on this side or on this side. Those are the options. And Dutch door shelves are made dependent on the swing of the opening as well. A Dutch door shelf mounted on the pull side only is a different shape than one that's centered or one that's mounted on the push side only. And we'll take a look at the Seco technical manual for that. There is also a piece of hardware called the Dutch door quadrant. Those are used to secure the upper and lower leaves as well. I have had reports back fairly recently from a client that he didn't like. He ordered a Dutch door quadrant. I didn't supply it, and I was brought into the conversation to say, do you know of a better Dutch door quadrant? The problem was the lower leaf was secured in the jamb. The upper leaf, in the closed position, that was all held together by a quadrant. The client said that he could move the upper leaf a little bit because the quadrant allowed a small amount of play. And it was an import item that he had ordered. I don't want to say the name of the company because I don't remember exactly which of these importers. I know that he was asking if the Baldwin was a higher quality item. I let the client know that I've not sold many quadrants, but those that I've sold, I've not had clients that have come back. Ives could have made quadrants the last time I sold one. I haven't had clients report back that it was a quality issue. But if it was me and it's an exterior door, this was residential, if it was me and it was an exterior door, I'd probably use a bolt is what I would do, because I would definitely want to have a positive seal on the opening, meaning when you close your door, you're going to hit the gasketing. I'm talking about residential exterior doors, or commercial for that matter. You're going to close that door hard against the seal, and you want it to stay there. When you close that upper leaf, you want it to also be biased against the face of the gasketing and then bolt it down. You don't want to have a situation where the door gets pushed against the gasketing and then relaxes. That's not ideal. The way that I know that that's the best way to do that is if you study a strike plate of a mortise lock that has a deadbolt function. Most of the time, the vertical cut on one side of the strike for the latch and then the one for the bolt are perfectly lined up. There are times when they are not perfectly lined up. The deadbolt is just skewed back ever so slightly. And the reason that that's like that is that when you close the door and it latches, that gasketing is now pushing against the face of the door. The door gets pushed tight and then it relaxes ever so slightly. If you've ever installed a strike and you've had to file it, well, if those two lines were not slightly offset from each other, when you went to throw the deadbolt, it wouldn't go in the hole, because the manufacturers of those locks, and who does it is Accurate in Connecticut, Accurate Lock and Hardware. When you throw that deadbolt, it goes in super nice. Baldwin may do it as well, I don't recall, but it's a really nice feature. That same sort of concept here. There's a relaxing between the two, and if you've got a sloppy quadrant that's allowing that movement, that's not ideal at all, because in this residential application, you've got a solid latch that's inside the hole of a strike, and that's going to hold it really closed. If you've got a quadrant with an elbow and a part that's rotating around that vertical that axis of pivoting, I could see there being some play in that. So if it was me, it'd be a solid bolt, or I would simply possibly just put a deadbolt above, is what I would likely do, or I would put a slam latch above, like the Schlage B250 or the Marks. I think it's a 145, yeah, the Marks 145. Now, I've also done a Dutch door that worked superbly. I didn't supply the door, but I supplied the lock for it. And what we did with that neat one was, you've got a Dutch door, you've got a shelf. I know there's a shelf on this. And the problem with, the client wanted a mortise lock. Well, the problem with a mortise lock is that now the key's kind of hard to get into because the shelf was on the inside. The key's kind of hard to get into. And then you've got the lever trim down. Well, Accurate, going back to Accurate, they make upside down versions of their mortise locks. So what's great about that is the lever was up higher, or knob, whatever it was, which was okay. But what made it easier is that you don't need to see a lever to rotate it, but you sure need to see the key to stick it in the broaching of the cylinder. So when we flipped it upside down, it moved that cylinder down, that 3 inches or whatever it was, moved the trim up a little higher, and it worked superbly for that client. And I've also located the outline of that upside down lock job that we did as well, and that was from 2018 actually. So we'll take a look at what the client was doing with that as well. Let's switch to the screen view. Let's look at all of these things that I've talked about. Let's look at the SDI definition. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so the upside down mortise lock job, this was the client's door. It's quite beautiful. I'm now thinking there wasn't a shelf, but there may have been. Now I'm second guessing if there was a shelf on this. What I would have done here is I certainly would have rabbited these edges. That does have the ability to really complicate what you may or may not be doing there. Weather stripping, it would be really ideal for interlocking weather stripping there. If you were to try to have a flush bolt, let's say, which I've seen that as well, in the sense that I've seen flush bolts installed in the edge of these doors and bolt down. You'd open up the entire door with your latch, your lock down here, and then you can use a flush bolt. And here's the inside of it. Yeah, let's just say that there was no shelf on this. Okay, and here's the upside down mortise lock. This is a full version of a mortise lock, and it's literally drawn upside down. So please note that upside down locks that accept cylinders, the cylinder core will be upside down as well. We recommend specifying cylinders without face markings, meaning order a mortise cylinder that doesn't have the manufacturer's logo or name on it, because it'll be upside down. All right. Okay, here's my outline. I did a 9148 accurate knob by knob, and that's important for the springs, for the trim. Baldwin Estate. So I did an accurate mortise body, USD upside down, for Baldwin knobs. Pair of these Baldwin knobs, these K005 knobs. I don't recall what those look like. Let's take a look. Oh, look at that. Fancy. Really nice. Nice looking knob. Absolutely. Okay, so, and then on this same lock, we needed an extended lip strike plate as well. So that complicated it a sense in the fact that we needed to order the strike. And then I used a Kaba Ilko 7246. That's a mortise cylinder, doesn't have any marking on the face. We did a 6748 thumb turn. Oh, okay, so we were just tricking out the rest of the hardware to go onto the mortise lock, and then we did a Baldwin Dutch door quadrant. Never had any sort of a complaint from the client on that Dutch door quadrant. So it worked out really, really well for this client. It's been 6 years. No one's ever called and said it didn't work. Okay, let's take a look at this Dutch door that was fire rated. And again, singles only, pairs are it's just not available, period. So this is a fire rated Dutch door, 4070, inch and 3/4 90-minute, 18 gauge medallion, steel stiffened. I remember the job was specified as steel stiffened. Lower leaf prepped for 2 5-inch standard weight butts. Upper leaf prepped for 2 standard weight butts at Seco standard locations. And the upper leaf is prepped for that Marks 145K, and latching into the bottom leaf at 2 3/4 back set from leaf lower edge at 2 3/4 back set from leaf lower edge and 5 3/16 back set. What I'm trying to say there is, I believe that baked someone's noodle over at Seco. So what we have is this. We have this. That's 2 3/4. Then we had this back set. That's 5 3/16. That's what I was saying. Move it over here, move it up over here. That's what I was trying to tell the factory. So let's look at a Marks 145. We'll probably have to dig up the catalog. Okay. 145, cylindrical cartridge dead latch. Dead latch. Really important. More important was this, UL listed. The K function is cylinder by thumb piece, and then of course we specified the 2 3/4 back set. So we used this installed vertically to latch the upper and lower leaves together. Now the lower leaf had this Lockmasters LKM10 KH X10S2 high security lock and Marks 1136 strike and top rail at 5 3/16 back set. So this Lockmasters lock must have an unusual requirement for back set. LKM10K series, yeah. Right, I recall this. So the bottom line is, because you've got to fit all of this on there, this thing's going to have you see how expensive these things are? So this was a high security lock that they were doing on that lower leaf. And, you know, I've got all of the templates for it, and I would really have to start from scratch. 5 1/4 to high edge of bevel. So why did I say 5 3/16? So, because it's giving us 5 1/4 high edge of bevel. Well, backset is measured. You've got these 4 different door edge types, right? Backset is measured from here. I know that the door was beveled. 5 1/4 is to this. 5 3/16 would be really close to this, and 5 1/8 would be really close to this. So if I told them 5 1/4 backset, it would actually be incorrect, because backset is measured from the center of the thickness of the door, which means backset doesn't care what your door thickness is. Backset's never measured off the high or the low edge. It's always measured off the center. Okay, so that's why I made that adjustment. So yeah, we've got this really cool lock here. Back to the rest of what we specified for it. Upper leaf, lock. Upper leaf to have Seco alternate astragal flat bar type welded to bottom edge of access side. Upper leaf reinforced for a closer. Yeah, that makes sense. So what we were basically saying here, that alternate astragal, and there apparently is a shelf. Dutch door shelf, 4 foot wide, 5 3/4 deep for access side, for ingress side of door shipped loose with 4 gussets, full depth. Okay, so what this meant was, what I'm thinking we did, well, what was the hand? Left hand reverse. Okay, so it swung out. Ingress side. What I'm thinking that we did here is that we had the upper leaf, we had the shelf, we had the lower leaf. Okay, left hand reverse, so that swung out this way. So that latch from the marks would have been coming across the top of that until it engaged in here. That's probably what was done. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe what we were doing was, swings out this way, alternate astragal. Upper leaf closes, it pushes the lower active leaf closed into the closed position. Latching here, high-tech fancy Lockmasters LMK10 here is what that must have been, because there was definitely an astragal between these two. That would make most sense of what was done, actually. Okay, now let's just dive into the Seco technical manual and just see what quick stuff we can come up with when it comes to a Dutch. Yeah. Okay, so these are going to be pretty typical heights. Dimension A is the upper leaf. Yeah, it's good for a 7.0. It's going to fall right where that lock is. So you're really not using standard material for this at all. That's obviously a centered shelf. Now, I had mentioned earlier about how they're made unusually, in the sense that this has a big relief on it here. And what I mean by that is, if you've got a door inside of here and you're going to put a shelf and it's centered on the inside, you can have that shelf just like this. Well, if you try that trick, what I was saying was, if you try that trick out here, a door's not going to open here. So generally you're going to see a shelf that's going to be cut back like this, just as it's shown here. You can go like that, but they'll make them symmetrical like this, so you can kind of flip them around. It doesn't matter. I personally wouldn't do that. I would make shelves, centered shelves. I think I would always make them. That's where your door. This is your door in here, right? So here is your inside. Well, depending on the hand, if they're left or right hand swing, this is the inside. If they're left hand reverse, right hand reverse, okay, well then this is your outside. So you just flip them around the way that you see fit. That's what I would do. What else does Seco have? More good dimensions here. You know, we were taking that lock and flipping it vertically. Yeah, 4 gussets. That could have been. I called that out in the menu, in the order to the factory, because I think the specs called out gussets like that. That's what that is. Screwed on, welded on, probably just screwed on. Oh yeah, and that's your half shelf. That would be for an in-swing door or an outswing door. It doesn't really matter if it's in or outswing, but it's a half shelf. Okay, astragal. Let's see if there's anything. Let's see if the Curry's tech manual has anything to add to that. Currys and Seco are owned by the same company. 747 Dutch. Yeah, same stuff. Locking it top to bottom. There's a strike prep right there in the lower leaf. Reference to an astragal. Notching that if you've got a lip, like a T-strike with a lip here. Prep for a strike here. If you've got a shelf, that's neat stuff. There's a shelf. A couple of gussets. There's a full shelf. Yeah, the Curry's manual is usually pretty nice too. Those gussets are there. You need a way to hold it on. That is a monorail door. That's a very different conversation. Monorail. I haven't done one of those in probably 10 years. Super easy. You just got to get your tape measure out and think about it. And then locations for Dutch doors. How big, you know, what's the top leaf, what's the lower leaf, what's the gap between the two, and do you need to run an audible on any of that based on what they want to do, like that Lockmaster's fire rated and how we were going to keep that all together. Okay, let's look at, finally, let's look at the definition. Dutch door, a door consisting of two separate leaves, one above the other, may be provided with a shelf at its top edge of the bottom leaf. So, yeah, we've covered that. Half shelf, full shelf, you know, whatever's being done there. Next is Dutch door frame. We'll talk about that. It won't be as detailed of an explanation, but we're just going to talk about the frame. Let's move on to the next definition, Dutch door frame. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.